When you talk about heavy rock in the 70s, what bands come to mind? To some, you're thinking of three bands: Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath. But there is one band I feel is criminally underrated, and that band is Uriah Heep. Welcome to Bryer's Music Showcase. I'm Bryer and welcome back to another video. And this is going to be a more simplistic video. This is not a forgotten history video. So it's not really me going through in-depth history of a particular band, but this is going to be types of videos where I'm going to highlight a particular artist or band, and this is just me kind of gushing over them. Because in recent time, I've gotten to a pretty big Uriah Heep kick as of late. And when I first got into them, I did have that kick, but in recent time, like I mentioned, it's back full force, and it's inspired me to pick up all the 70s albums, at least the ones with the more well-known lineup of the band. So I'm only going to be talking about albums from 1970 to 1976. That's generally considered the classic era of the band. And, you know, I could also talk about other eras. You know, we have the late 70s stuff with a different lineup and a different singer. But maybe I'll save these for a forgotten history video in the future. But like I said, Uriah Heep, very great hard rock band from England, and some really great heavy stuff, and also incorporates a little bit of prog sensibilities, not too much, but every once in a while they'll throw in a big 10-minute epic or something. So we don't have a ton to go through. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 albums I'm going to be showcasing here. And I'm just going to give my off-the-cuff thoughts, and hopefully this video will inspire you to check out this band if you haven't already. Of course, granted, a lot of my audience is pretty older, so I'd be shocked if they didn't. But here we go. I'm going to start this off. So if you're a big fan of Uriah Heep, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and of course in the comments you can let me know your history with this band. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Bryer's Music Showcase is brought to you by the people over at Patreon. Pledge today and get access to exclusive perks. Link in the description. So naturally, we're going to start with their debut album from 1970. This is called Very Eavy, Very Umble. And yes, you have to say it like that because they're British, so they're not going to pronounce the H's. And I always found this album cover quite intriguing. I believe this is the lead singer, David Byron, and they just put a bunch of cobwebs on him. Kind of freaky when you first see it, but I kind of like it, oddly enough. Now, what's interesting about this band is that, especially early on, whenever they released their albums in the US, they always kind of changed stuff. Either they changed the track listing, or in some cases they changed the entire album cover. So this was the original UK cover, but then when they brought it to America, they changed it to this, basically this like serpent creature. I mean, it's still kind of interesting, but I don't know. You can comment below which one you prefer. But anyway, but yeah, this is a very strong debut album. Again, the first song, Gypsy, which is pretty much a classic among Uriah Heep fans, great way to introduce the band. It's got this kind of heavy guitar riff along with some very good Hammond organ playing by Ken Hensley. I'd say if you want to get an idea of what Uriah Heep is like, Gypsy is probably a good one. One of the ones you should check out first. But the rest of the album is also very strong. You know, Walking in Your Shadow. They have a nice cover of Come Away Melinda, Lucy Blues, Real Turned On, the last song, Wake Up, parentheses, Set Your Sights. It's a very strong opening album. And there's even some little fun facts. I think Nigel Olsson plays on, I think, either one or a couple of the songs on this album. So Nigel Olsson, you know, most people know him for being in Elton John's backing band, but here he is, kind of a bit more early on, but still kind of a cool fun fact when you hear it. But still, like I said, strong debut. But then you get to the second album, Salisbury, and this is another case where they changed the album cover, because the UK cover has this like tank, which, you know, kind of badass if you ask me. But for the US, I believe the booklet includes it as well. Oh yeah, this like weird, I don't know what you would call this thing. Kind of weird demon looking thing. I mean, it's pretty dark, but again, you can let me know which cover you prefer. But of course, I'm more inclined to the original album covers. Not to say I have anything against the US covers, but you know, is what it is. So, but oh, there you go. But I think this is definitely a big step up from the debut. Although again, they're not too far apart from each other, but I do prefer this one a bit more because you have the opening song, Birds of Prey. Excellent song, and that's where you really hear David Byron's very operatic sort of sensibilities with how he can go very high with his voice. And Bird of Prey is a good example of that. You know, The Park's pretty good, Time to Live, another good rocker. But then you have the more, I guess, anthemic, more, I guess, not really pop, more commercial, radio-friendly track with Lady in Black. And that one's with Ken Hensley on lead vocals, which is kind of cool. High Priestess is a good song, but man, the last song, the title track, that's an epic without a doubt, because they bring in like pretty much a whole symphony on this track. You got the horns, you know, and you have the mixture of the prog, and you have an excellent guitar solo from Mick Box, and again a great vocal performance from David Byron. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite Uriah Heep songs. So the title track is definitely a good one. But there you go. That's the second one, and now we get to the third album, and I think it's still my favorite, and that's the third album, Look at Yourself. Now you look at this album cover and you're like, what the heck is this dumb kind of graphic design looking thing? Well, I will admit the CD cover, well, at least the CD copy really does the album cover injustice, because this is one of those cases where you really need to get this on record, which I do have over here. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here it is, because the thing about this album cover is that you can actually look at yourself. Like, yeah, you can kind of see the camera right there. But yeah, this is very cool. And like I said, it's probably my favorite Uriah Heep album, as I just mentioned. You know, the title track, just a great high energy rock song. I Want to Be Free is great. And then you have another great epic with July Morning. Just another really good, kind of more adventurous type of song. But then you have Tears in My Eyes, Shadows of Grief, another heavy track that one is, What Should Be Done, and then you have Love Machine. But man, is this a excellent hard rock album. And then you get to the fourth album, and this is kind of where you have the classic lineup of the band, and that lineup is David Byron on vocals, Mick Box on guitar, Ken Hensley on organ and other keyboards, and main songwriter, Lee Kerslake on drums, and then you have Gary Thane on bass. And Gary Thane is a very, very underrated bass player. Like, his bass playing on some of these albums I'm going to be showing now, some very great stuff for a rock band. So it starts with this one, Demons and Wizards, and to most people this is kind of seen as probably the good album to start with, because it's not too out there, it's not too proggy. It does kind of, it's a more consistent sort of hard rock sound, but you still got some well done, more radio friendly songs like The Wizard, and then probably their more well-known track with Easy Living, which both are great songs. But the rest of the album is very good too, with Traveler in Time, Poet's Justice, Circle of Hands, and then Rainbow Demon, just a dark, brooding song. I love it. All My Life, and then you have Paradise, which goes into The Spell. So like I said, probably a good one to start with if you want to check out Uriah Heep. And I also got to bring up the album cover, because it's a Roger Dean album cover. Of course, we all know him from his work with Yes. Just wanted to highlight that. But again, really good, very good one here. Definitely in my top 5, I would say. And then following Demons and Wizards, we have the follow-up. We have Demons and Wizards. This is 1972 at this point now. And the same year they released this album. And I've read that Ken Hensley originally intended this to be a kind of a more epic concept album, if you will. But because they had to quickly capitalize on the success of this one, they didn't really have time. And to some people, they kind of hear that it's not as strong as this, but that all said, it's still a really good album. It's still one of their most well-known albums. And again, another Roger Dean artwork, which I think you can actually see the full artwork this time. Yeah, there you go. So on this album, you have some songs like Sunrise, very great opening songs. Spider Woman, kind of catchy actually, if you kind of really think about it. Blind Eye, Echoes in the Dark, Rain. Then you have another kind of more, I guess, more radio-friendly song with Sweet Lorraine, which is great. Tales, and then you have the, I guess, the epic on here with the title track. It's a very cool, again, them showing their prog side yet again. It's pretty interesting track. So again, I mean, I will say it's not as strong as Demons and Wizards, but again, I still would recommend this one. And from that point on, we go to 1973, where they would release this live album, which many people say is definitely one of the best ones of the 70s, and I would definitely agree. And I'm speaking of someone who's not really that into live albums. This was like a pretty good listen through and through. I mean, this is a two disc pack. Disc 1 is basically the entire live album, but disc 2 has some bonus material, which is kind of interesting. But yep, it's basically a greatest hits if you really think about it. And then the same year, they would follow that up with a studio album with Sweet Freedom, and still pretty good, but you're starting to see the album quality starting to decline a little bit. And have seen most people say this is probably the last of that classic Uriah Heep run. And you know, I don't fully disagree, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This is still a pretty strong album, still pretty good. You know, Stealin's probably the best known song on this album. One Day, the title track, Sweet Stars, Circus, Pilgrim, even the Dreamer, I almost forgot to mention. Again, the whole album is pretty good, but again, just not quite as strong as some of the previous albums, but still worth exploring if you wish. And then we get to 1974. We have Wonderworld. It's one of those things where I keep saying Wonderwall, even though that's a completely different thing entirely. But Wonderworld is kind of where things really start to kind of slowly fall apart. You know, they're touring a lot, and some of the members were getting heavily involved in drugs. Most notably Gary Thane, who was getting to heroin, and I think even cocaine probably, which I'm not going to be too shocked by that. And then some of the members were also feeling exhausted from the constant touring and recording. I know Ken Hensley was going through it, especially because there's a song on here called So Tired. So that's kind of revealing. And this is the last of the classic lineup. You know, Gary Thane would leave due to his drug habits, and then he would kind of pass away not long after of a drug overdose. So this is kind of the end of an era, if you will. But I still got 2 more albums to showcase in this video. But I still like this album, but you're starting to hear the cracks beginning to show. But again, there's still some good songs on that. And then Gary Thane's out of the band, so they need somebody to replace him. And who would they get? Well, they ended up picking up John Wetton, of course, known for King Crimson prior. So they brought him in for Return to Fantasy. And I think it's another pretty decent album. Probably one of the more weaker ones at this point now. Yeah, they're starting to see a trend here. The albums are getting a bit weaker. But, you know, the first song, Return to Fantasy, is a great opening song. You know, Devil's Daughter is pretty good. You know, Prima Donna, I mean, it was basically a song about David Byron because he was becoming a bit of a diva during this point. And again, his alcoholism was becoming an issue as well, big time. But yeah, there's a lot of good tracks on here. There's some good tracks. But, you know, it's, again, not quite on the same level as I've said before. And all the problems would all come ahead when we get to this one. We get High and Mighty from 76. Pretty interesting cover with the flying gun. Yeah, at this point, no one in the band's getting along that well. Again, David Byron is really becoming an asshole at this point, and you can definitely tell something's up. It's because the first song, One Way or Another, is where David Byron's not even present at all. You have John Wetton taking lead vocals and Ken Hensley as well. But David's still on the album, but I think it's kind of telling, if you ask me. This, again, to me, this is definitely the weakest of the David Byron era. Again, I don't hate it. There's some songs I did enjoy from here, but we're getting to this low period, and it all just comes ahead afterward because, again, David Byron would be fired because of his alcohol problem, and the band would go on, and they would have a new era with a different lineup and singer, like I mentioned in the beginning. But like I also said in the beginning, I think I'm going to save these for a future video. But that's about it. So again, if you are a hard rock fan from this, especially from the 70s, like the ones from Uriah Heep, I definitely would check out. Definitely check out the debut album up to about Sweet Freedom. I think that's a very good kind of group of albums to check out, and you can even throw in the live album too. And everything 1974 to 76, you know, again, these aren't bad albums by no stretch, but again, just not quite as essential as some of the ones I've talked very highly of. But there you go. That is just my very quick overview of my experience with Uriah Heep. Again, just excellent musicianship on this one. Again, I love David Byron's very theatrical, very bombastic vocal style, very reminiscent of Freddie Mercury, which I have read that I think David Byron was one of Freddie's kind of influence. I know Uriah Heep played a part in Queen's development, and I can definitely hear it. So that's kind of why I really enjoy that sort of more theatrical side to the band. And even when you watch live videos of the band performing, like, they were pretty good performers. And again, the guitar work from Mick Box is very good. Again, another underrated guitar player. And Ken Hensley, another one of these unsung, like, Hammond organ kind of players that doesn't get brought up enough. And Gary Thane on bass, and Lee Kerslake on drums, which I didn't talk much in this video, but of course he would later join Ozzy Osbourne on the Blizzard of Oz album, which is another cool little connection there. But that's where I'm going to leave it here. Again, if you're a big fan of Uriah Heep, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and comment below if you enjoy these types of more simpler videos where I just gush over a band for a little bit and give recommendations. I look forward to reading those comments, and until then, I will see you in the next video. Links to all my Patreon page and Buy Me a Coffee, all those links are down below, as well as my social medias. And I'll see you next time. Thank you again for watching. Goodbye for now.